Also for ultranationalist forces from Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare. Alright, let's start with the guys who basically defined modern military shooters for a generation. The OPSO, for which is just a military shorthand for opposing forces. In the early missions of the USMC campaign, these are the anonymous, generic enemy soldiers you're fighting against. They're that faceless army that gets you used to the game's combat loop. But there's so much more than just cannon fodder. These are the foot soldiers for a revolutionary force led by a guy named Khalid al-Assad. And as we soon find out, even he's just a puppet for a much bigger, scarier power, the Russian ultranationalists. These guys, kitted out with Russian-made AKs, RPGs, and even tanks, were essentially the bait in one of the most devastating traps in gaming history. Their entire purpose was to draw a massive US invasion force into the capital city, right onto a nuclear weapon that was waiting to be detonated remotely. The blast wiped out 30,000 Marines in an instant. It was a horrifying demonstration of what a proxy force can do. A seemingly local enemy that's actually being backed by a hidden, much more powerful player who's willing to sacrifice them all for a bigger strategic goal. Diving a little deeper, this OPFOR is the paramilitary group that seized power in an unnamed Middle Eastern country through a violent coup. Their leader, the charismatic but brutally effective Khalid al-Assad, executed the president on live TV to create a massive international crisis that he knew would force America to intervene. And that was all part of the master plan. This huge distraction pulled US resources and attention away from a civil war brewing in Russia, allowing the real villains, the ultranationalists, to gain crucial ground against Russian loyalist forces. That nuke? It wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement. Al-Assad's forces from Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare. So, let's talk about that revolutionary force we just mentioned, led by Khalid al-Assad himself. His name actually means lion, which is pretty fitting for a guy who overthrew a government, but his charismatic leadership was all a front. In reality, he was just one of the key lieutenants, one of Imran Zakayev's so-called Four Horsemen in the larger ultranationalist scheme. His forces, armed to the teeth with Russian-supplied equipment, were the ones on the ground causing chaos and implementing a shock and awe strategy. They rounded up and executed supporters of the old regime, while securing key infrastructure and valuable oil fields. But they were ultimately pawns in a much larger game. The trap that wiped out the Marines required sacrificing al-Assad's own men who were still in the city. He was just a puppet, and his forces show us how devastating a proxy army can be, and how little their shadowy backers really care about them when it's time to pay the price. On screen, al-Assad was this fiery leader spouting anti-Western rhetoric on TV, talking about national purification and accusing the ousted president of being a Western collaborator. It was all designed to be the perfect catalyst to draw the West into a fight. The craziest part? Al-Assad himself had already fled the country before the nuke even went off. He was eventually tracked down to a safe house in Azerbaijan by Captain Price himself, and well, let's just say his interrogation was very, very short. The ultranationalists from Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3. Now let's meet the masterminds, the big bads, the foundational villains of the entire original Modern Warfare trilogy. This is a Russian political party, led first by this ruthless oligarch named Imran Zakayev. Zakayev lost his arm when Captain Price shot him during a failed assassination attempt at Pripyat in 1996. After Zakayev, the party was led by the absolutely psychotic Vladimir Makarov. Their goal was simple but insane: restore Russia to its Soviet-era glory by any means necessary. And I mean any means. They started by funding coups and facilitating a nuclear strike in the Middle East. Then, in Modern Warfare 2, they orchestrated the infamous No Russian Massacre, a false flag attack designed to frame the US and justify a full-scale invasion of America. By Modern Warfare 3, they're launching chemical weapons across Europe and trying to assassinate their own president to maintain control. They are the ultimate embodiment of state-sponsored terrorism and ideological extremism, and their campaign of destruction literally spans the entire globe, from the Middle East to small-town America. They evolved from being this shadowy group pulling the strings in the background to becoming full-blown world-threatening aggressors. After Zakayev's death, Makarov took the reins and formed an even more extreme splinter group called the Inner Circle. This Inner Circle was made up of his most loyal followers, and they were the ones who carried out his most brutal orders, like the airport massacre and the chemical attacks in Europe. Their story is a 3-game arc that escalates all the way into a full-scale World War III, and it doesn't end until Price finally takes Makarov out in that iconic showdown at the Hotel Oasis. The Inner Circle from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3. Speaking of Makarov's fan club, let's talk about the Inner Circle specifically. This was the name for his elite inner circle of loyalists within the larger ultranationalist party after it splintered. While the mainstream ultranationalists under the new president Boris Varshevsky were trying to consolidate power, the extremists who craved even more violence flocked to Makarov. This group's ideals aren't really discussed in detail, What matters is their fiercely intense loyalty to Makarov as their visionary leader. They were his personal instrument of terror, used to commit atrocities not just against the West but also against the new Russian government under Vereshchevsky when he tried to make peace with NATO. Their most infamous act was, of course, the No Russian massacre at Zakhaev International Airport. But their campaign of terror didn't stop there. They hijacked President Vereshchevsky's plane, launched chemical attacks in London, and fought a desperate last stand at a fortress in Siberia, and finally at the Hotel Oasis in Dubai. With the death of Makarov at the hands of Captain Price, it's assumed the inner circle just fell apart into shambles. Their reason for existing gone. Al-Qaeda from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. Modern Warfare 2. Now this group from the rebooted Modern Warfare series is a bit more complex and morally gray. Al-Qaeda, which is Arabic for the killing, is a brutal radical Islamist terrorist organization. They're operating globally but are deeply entrenched in this fictional country called Urzikstan. They're led by a seriously dangerous dude named Omar the Wolf Suleiman, and they're notorious for being ruthless and using chemical weapons. What makes them so interesting is their origin story. They weren't always straight-up terrorists. They actually began as a splinter group from the Urzikstan Liberation Force, ULF, believing that the ULF's tactics weren't effective enough. They started as freedom fighters, resisting a brutal Russian occupation in Urzikstan. But over time, that noble cause got corrupted by a radical nihilistic ideology, turning them into the monsters we see in the game. It adds a layer of moral ambiguity to the whole conflict that reflects the complexities of real-world warfare. In Modern Warfare 2, they get even more dangerous by forming a strategic alliance with a Mexican drug cartel, Los Sin Nombre, creating this hybrid threat that mixes religious extremism with a straight-up criminal enterprise to infiltrate the US. Early on, they also forged an alliance with Iran, who supplied them with advanced military equipment like bomb drones, night vision goggles, and proper infantry training, transforming them from a ragtag militia into a more professionalized fighting force. They're scary capable for a non-state actor. They have cells in London and all over Europe. This alliance with the cartel is a modern security nightmare. Ideological goals and economic motivations all twisted together into one pervasive threat. Shadow Company from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Shadow Company represents the dangerous evolution of modern combat, where soldiers become commodities and loyalty follows funding rather than flags. This elite private military corporation boasts training and equipment rivaling top special forces units, but answers ultimately to profit margins rather than national interests. In the original timeline, General Shepard commanded these fiercely loyal mercenaries as his personal instrument of power. Their most devastating betrayal came when they turned on their Task Force 141 allies, executing Ghost and Roach to eliminate loose ends in Shepard's conspiracy to spark a global conflict that would cement his legacy as a hero. The reboot timeline presents a more corporatized version of Shadow Company, founded by Philip Graves in 2017 as a global military service provider. Frequently contracted by General Shepard, this iteration initially operates alongside Task Force 141 before turning against them to cover up a failed missile transaction and subsequent operational disasters. Across both timelines, Shadow Company embodies the perils of privatized warfare. Their distinctive black uniforms with spade insignia, not skull emblems, mark them as formidable professionals without national allegiance. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths, that the greatest threats to security may not come from external ideologies but from within our own military-industrial complex, where profit motives can corrupt even the most elite warriors. Even after Shepard's demise and Graves' downfall, Shadow Company persists under new leadership in the Warzone narrative, demonstrating how such PMCs can become self-sustaining entities with their own agendas. Permanent, persistent threats in the global security landscape. Los Sin Nombre from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Los Sin Nombre translates to the Nameless, and that's exactly why they are a powerful and incredibly secretive Mexican drug cartel. But they're not just moving products. Under the hidden leadership of a fierce woman named Valeria Garza, who goes by the codename El Sin Nombre, they form a deadly alliance with Al-Qatala. They provide the terrorists with smuggling routes into the US in exchange for weapons and support. This fusion of narco-terrorism and radical extremism creates a pervasive threat that destabilizes entire regions for territory, profit, and power. In the game, they force you into intense, gritty, close-quarters urban combat in Mexican cities, which is a totally different vibe from the usual large-scale battlefields. This partnership is a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Al-Qatala gets a path into the United States, and the cartel gets more firepower and weapons to dominate its region. The cartel is run with extreme secrecy. Even high-ranking members don't know Valeria is the boss, so hunting them down becomes this intriguing narrative puzzle where you're piecing together clues to find the leader behind the name. Cortus Die from Call of Duty Black Ops 2. This is a unique one. Cordis Dai, which roughly translates to Heart of Day or Day of Heart, isn't a traditional army. It's a global populist movement led by the charismatic and deeply vengeful Raul Menendez. Menendez weaponized social media and a powerful narrative of historical American aggression to rally billions of disillusioned people around the world to his cause. His big act of terrorism wasn't with guns or bombs, it was a cyber attack. He hacked the entire US drone fleet and turned it against American cities. This group represents the 21st century threat, cyber warfare, information manipulation, and how a populist leader can weaponize rhetoric and historical grievance to turn the masses against a perceived enemy. It's less of an organization and more of a revolutionary idea. Menendez used people's anger about Western imperialism and economic inequality to fuel his movement, and he did it using social media manipulation years before it became a real-world worry. Because it's so decentralized, you can't just attack a base to stop it. Conventional military force is useless. This forces the player to confront Menendez directly, rather than simply dismantling a traditional hierarchy. Perseus from Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Perseus is less of a terrorist group and more of a legend. It's the code name for a Soviet deep-cover intelligence operation so secret, most people in the intelligence community think it's a myth. Their goal was simple: ensure the destruction of both the Soviet Union and the US, and create a new world order with a rebuilt dominant Russia. How? By stealing Western technology and sabotaging its nuclear capabilities. Led by a ghost known only as Perseus, their power came from their anonymity. They were embedded at the highest levels of Western society, maybe even inside the CIA itself. They represent the pure paranoia of the Cold War, the fear that the enemy is already hidden among us, and that the most important battles are fought in the shadows with espionage and sabotage, not on an open battlefield. The entire campaign of Black Ops Cold War is about chasing this ghost. You're running around the globe, from East Berlin to Vietnam, trying to find clues and interrogate people just to figure out who they are. The big, chilling reveal that they've infiltrated the CIA itself plays right into that classic spy thriller, fear of moles and traitors in the most trusted institutions. Based loosely on a real-life Soviet spy of the same name, this group is the ultimate embodiment of Cold War anxiety. Unnamed Iranian terrorist organization from Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. The unnamed Iranian terrorist organization in Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War represents a nuanced portrayal of how regional militant groups became entangled in global Cold War politics. Through its leaders, Arash Kadivar and Qasim Javadi, the organization embodies the complex motivations behind political violence, blending personal trauma, ideological fervor, and pragmatic alliances with powerful patrons like Perseus. Their role in the game's narrative serves as both an engaging gameplay introduction to the broader conspiracy and a thematic foundation for exploring the moral ambiguities and geopolitical complexities of the Cold War era. The organization's eventual downfall not only advances the plot, but also demonstrates how personal rivalries and betrayals can have far-reaching consequences in the shadow world of intelligence and counterterrorism operations. The group remains a memorable component of the Black Ops Cold War experience, providing players with a tangible sense of how large-scale ideological conflicts were often fought through smaller proxy wars and regional engagements, where the lines between freedom fighters, terrorists, and geopolitical pawns were constantly blurred. Atlas Corporation from Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. The Atlas Corporation began as a private military company, PMC, and a perceived force for good, but under the leadership of the visionary yet megalomaniacal Jonathan Irons, it evolved into a fascistic global superpower. Believing humanity to be self-destructive, Irons orchestrated a catastrophic false flag operation by allowing the KVA to destroy nuclear facilities worldwide, killing thousands and rendering entire cities uninhabitable. He then used the resulting chaos to position Atlas as the only capable global security force before launching a coup to install it as a new technocratic world government. Their terrorism is corporate and systemic. They don't want to destroy the world, they want to own it and control it through advanced technology, such as exoskeletons and directed energy weapons and privatized warfare. They represent the danger of corporate overreach and a scary kind of technocratic fascism. You watch this transformation happen. Irons is first hailed as a hero for saving Washington, D.C., but you slowly see his contempt for democracy take over. His philosophy is that efficient, corporate-style governance is better than messy democracy. His villainy culminates in that attack that wipes out world leadership so he can declare himself the absolute ruler of a new world order. It's a story that makes you question the price of technological progress and what happens when we hand over national security to private companies. The Federation from Call of Duty Ghosts. Finally, we have the Federation. This isn't a group or a corporation, it's a full-blown nation-state. It's a coalition of South American nations that struck it rich with oil wealth. They became a dominant global power by devastating the United States first with a terrifying orbital weapon system called Odin. Vaporizing cities and launching a full-scale invasion is the ultimate form of state-sponsored terrorism. Their goal was complete hegemony. They wanted to turn the United States into an occupied war zone and establish a new world order with them on top. They represent this nightmare scenario where a new world power uses overwhelming technological superiority like orbital bombardment to achieve total victory. The game's setting is a post-apocalyptic America because of them. Cities are in ruins and survivors are living in makeshift camps. You play as one of the Ghosts, a resistance fighter from the remnants of the US military fighting a desperate guerrilla war against this high-tech occupation force. The Federation itself is kind of an enigma. It's more of a faceless empire than a group with a charismatic leader, which makes them feel like an unstoppable impersonal force.